So good day and welcome to the second presentation on how to better our collective day, how to shed life by pairing architecture, medicine, and AI. I am the IVADO and I'll be the moderator for this conference. Before starting on this topic, I just want to highlight some details on this conference. Now, I am the timekeeper actually for the conferences in order to abide by the schedule that was given to you. After François Lalonde's presentation, there will be a question period. And of course, you do not have access to your camera or mic, but on the right-hand side of your screen, you can use the tab question in order to write down the question that you would like to ask to the speaker, and I will be transferring the question. So the SoCal platform gives you the possibility to vote for the questions. If, of course, you prefer some questions, you can vote for them, and that will help us choose the questions in order to get them answer. Everything is being recorded. If you want to have any access to the deferred uh, presentation, you can go ahead and view it later. So Jean-François Lalonde is a professor of electric and computer science at the University of Laval. We're going to talk about pairing uh, architecture, medicine, and AI. So welcome. Floor is yours. So thank you very much, Fabien. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, indeed. So today it will be a pleasure to talk to you about light, about human well-being, and we'll take a look at the three different aspects helping us to define our project. Medicine, architecture, and AI. Computer science's involvement. So we'll start with the medicine. Medical science have everything to do with this a circadian cycle, which determines that our wake state starts around 10 o'clock in the morning, and around 2:30 p.m. we get our best coordination. So your body is very coordinated to listen and to have a discussion after this presentation, I hope. And after 9 o'clock, you have the secretion of melatonin helping us to sleep. And then at 2 a.m., it is a very profound state of sleep. You have the sun that rises the morning and uh, in the evening disappears. And, when we travel and we change time, and, we have difficulty because we're not synchronized with our own cycle. So, uh, the brain will receive the light thanks to the cell on the retina in our eyes, and you have the little cells that will be sensitive to light, and you can see that the max sensitivity will be around 500 of our wavelength. And then we have cones, three types in the majority of the population. These cones will allow you to perceive the colors. Some are sensitive to different wavelengths. And on top of those two, we have another type of cells. We are the photosensitive ganglion cells, and these cells will perceive the melanopic looks, and these are the cells that will not only receive the light, and we have a sensitivity of about 375 nanometers for natural light, and a large part of the light emitted in that wavelength will activate, and we are going to awake. Now, that was for the medical aspect. Now, architecture. How do we measure the melanoptic lux or light to see to what point we're going to be able to modulate through the architectures the light? Of course, we receive the light, and how will this will affect our well-being and our circadian circle, and we want it to be the best as possible. So we have architects whose goal is to measure that, to take a color camera, AGB, and have it 360 degrees around the scene. I'll take the color image, and we're going to obtain this kind of view to see where the light is mainly melanopic, so it will be in blue, indicated in blue. If you take this image, you make a conversion. On the right hand side, you can see that the light coming from outside has a melanopic dominance. And on the right hand side, you'll have a phototopic dominance actually, which is higher colors and so on. That has no effect on our circadian cycle. Now, we use this in our multi-design to better understand what an indoor environment will have to look like and how it will affect the well-being of its inhabitants or visitors. We use this, we look everywhere in order to take a look at the environment. It will help us better understand the existing environment in in order to design new environments that will be better adapted to our being. Now, in order to understand a little bit more how we measure the melanopic light, we have to talk about the dynamic area. We're not talking about a beach here and a workout, but we take a look at the intensity of the light, minimal and maximal. So if we take a 360-degree image that I took into this room and I measure the light source versus what has to be seen in on the ground, actually we can see that it's about three times more intense than the pixels on the ground. So does that correspond to what happens in the real life with our light? In order to see that, I can take the picture more rapidly by letting the Iowa camera open 60 times longer than usual. And I do realize now that the light here is a bit darker. And if I move more rapidly, I can see that the entire scene becomes completely black, but you can still see some light. So if I would have taken with a standard camera that picture, it's not indeed three times more intense, but 3,000 times. With a standard camera, I cannot capture the dynamic area, and it's very much so to be used when I want to measure melanopic light, and how does it affect my circadian cycle when I'm in one of those environments. More rapidly, according to what I'd like to tell you here, the melanopic light has to be studied in depth, because if I use the a low dynamic range and camera. Well, it's used to capture. I could use a camera from my cell phone also, and it would work. But unfortunately, it does not model the light in a valid fashion. But if I use the high dynamic range imagery, well, I'm able to use it in order to model the melanopic light, and it's more difficult and lengthier, and I need a more specific camera that will allow me to do so. So here we are. In order to measure the melanopic light, in order to analyze the human well-being, this is for the medical aspect in built environment architecture, and needs difficult techniques to be used. It has to be calibrated and so on. So now, when talking about artificial intelligence, in order to capture the light of our environment, this is is our goal today. Now, in our indoor environments, because afterwards, this is in the future, but what we want to do with these data is to predict the way people are going to feel and the way the indoor environments will be helpful to modulate these circadian cycles in different areas of the buildings. So this is our goal, and today we'll be talking about two main aspects. First of all, an aspect that will allow us to ease and capture the light everywhere. In an area, and want to be able to navigate and explore the real scene without having to make pictures of all of the single points of this area. So this is the first thing. The second thing will be to predict the invisible. So we're using a traditional camera and the high resolution one. So two aspects for that. We'll be using a conventional camera. The only peculiarity is it allows us to capture images at 360 degrees with one click on the camera. It gives me a panoramic view at 360 degrees. And then I have this holding stick and a dedicated photographer. What we will do is put the camera at the end of the stick and walking around in the area without measuring, calibrating it, and we don't need to know what is going on. We're just scanning the area. Now we get a vision structure for motion, and we're able to recover the position in the best way of the camera at each image that was captured by the camera. So it is a 3D image cloud, which gives you an overall picture of the area, and the tip of the pyramid gives you the position of the camera and the orientation of each of the images. So this gives us a calibration of the area with a series of image, a 3D position of the camera. Now, how do we learn from this? We are going to train a network of neurons in order to regenerate the appearance of the scene or the area at all points. Let's say I've placed my camera at those five places. If I concentrate on only one of those images, well, what does this image correspond to? These are rays in every direction from the camera to the extremities of the rooms until they intersect with an obstacle. Such as wall or a ceiling or a floor. Then, if I consider this array of light that brings us to a neural radiance field, which is quite recent. That was introduced 2 years ago. It gives you a three-dimensional point unidirectional position with a fully connected multi-layer perception, and then whatever doesn't have any light going through it. Uh, I continue tracing my ray and hit a surface, then opaque way will be calculated as being one. And we take a look at the color, and we are going to calculate the sum accumulated of those points obstructing the light, and then you will have as a result, an integration in order to give us an image resulting for that and giving us a captured image also in order to allow our connected network to rebuild the area. So this is a bit more simplified, and I trade my network, from those five viewpoints and the colors at each one of those points. And when it is trained, I find another point that was not captured, not measured, and I can regenerate a new image just by tracing back the different rays, and it will predict also the areas where light does not go through and so on. And we generate the animation that I showed you earlier at full resolution here. So I can move totally freely in an environment that I would have captured solely on scanning through my camera in a 3D space without really doing things specifically, without knowing at random. So I have this, and then it says full map, fully mapped, and then we go elsewhere. We could use it in a virtual reality also. So this was the aspect like everywhere in the room. We've used the neuronal radius to recreate the appearance of an area. Now, how do we do to predict the invisible and predict the dynamic area as such? As I showed you earlier, take a photograph with a standard camera. Well, it tells me that the light is about three times brighter than the floor, the ground. But the true reality is that light is 3,000 times more intense. So I could measure things, and we would get to this result. If it doesn't work, we'll need another part that will help us compensate the problem. There's another network that will learn how to predict the dynamic area. So you have the LDR image. And then you have the LDR HDR network, and then from that we get a DHDR image. So how do we do this? Through data. What does it mean? We went around with a high resolution camera, as we say, the big kit, and we worked in several environments, and we captured these data in order to get this image through the animation. When people have lots of time to spare, that's what they do. So we obtained 2,400 panoramas with high definition resolution, and this is really useful for researchers. So you could go to this website and you can contact me afterwards. It'll be a pleasure for me to share it with you. So how do we proceed with things? We take the HDR data images, generation of LDR image, and then we simulate the image. And then once we get to the network, LDR, HDR, we get the HDR predictions, and then we can see what is the loss of image. Sometimes it is difficult to view the dynamic area, so we could use it for the insertion of a virtual object like this image over here in the middle, and we can just shed some light on it. Then I obtain a fade out image. It's not too good to take a look at, but if I use the predicted HDR lighting, this is what I get. And you can see that there is some shade now, for example. And this is the real HDR with a complex procedure on left and right. You can compare those images and say that you are able to get more specific images. So there we go. We used AI in order to ease the capture of the light in different environments, to be able to see everywhere in an area and to predict the loss of the dynamic light and how does it affect our well-being. Now, I didn't tell you how do we combine both of those images. I'll take the LDR captured image through the network, and then I get the HDR, and then I send it with a new viewpoint and a dynamic area. So, you know, where are we heading with all of this? We are developing new factors that will not only have the RGB cameras for the HDR image, but we have the hyperspectral sensors that will be able to calculate the different angles and so on. And this is what we mean by the imagery aspect. And now the thermal cameras that measure heat sources that are very important for the thermal comfort of inhabitants. We don't like it when we have cold drafts or heat sources that are too high. So we can capture that. Now, I told you about a project using AI to capture light in our environment to better understand the human well-being, and we hope that we'll be able to predict this. So let me conclude by thanking my colleague Marc and Claude from medicine and architecture, and all of the students that have worked on this project. And I wanted to conclude by saying thank you very much, and I'd like to be answering your questions. And thank you very much. Very original presentation. We still have a few minutes for the question to be asked. Now, I would like to start by a question. Uh, where did you get the idea to work on this type of project, which is quite original? Well, it's quite interesting. When I'm telling you about the data that we get, what we did over here is that we had sophisticated cameras on tripods and we put them around in order to use. And then we walked around the campus at the university in order to take pictures. We went to the architecture school to take pictures and all of that. And there was Claude, a professor that was coming around, and I had some students with him, and he said, "What are you doing? It is interesting. The HDR is interesting, and so on." So he contacted me to know what we were doing with that, and we realized that we had common interests that were really, truly well aligned. So. We wanted to estimate the lighting and so on, but they use the HDR in order, as I told you today, to analyze the lighting as such. And this is how the collaboration started. You know, sometimes when we have just those kind of meetings, unplanned meetings, it brings us to interesting meetings actually. So people of different disciplines often don't speak the same language, as it was said previously, and this is really true when you're talking about engineering, architecture, artificial intelligence. What we had to change the language. Well, we have to be able to align our objectives. Yes, exactly. So we still have some time for other question. One first question from the attendants: would it be possible to give us a little bit more details as far as the involvement of the medical professionals or the architects, for example? Yes, absolutely. I didn't have time to discuss this today, but Mark, my colleague, works a lot with his students and the impact on light of our cycles, like the Circadian Cycle. And of course, when you work in hospitals and you have offices with no windows whatsoever, because like you're in the middle, smack in the middle of a hospital layout, then you don't get. So it is important to get an artificial light, you know. And the question that we're wondering about is what are the property of lighting to favor the fact that a person stays awake to prevent them from falling asleep. And what kind of different human behavior when we use, for example, when you go and buy a light bulb, for example, you can say, oh, um, uh, daylight or whatnot. So there's a notion of temperature linked to that, but the temperature of a light tells us what is the light spectrum. Do we want a bluish, a reddish, or yellowish light? So we made a lot of studies in order to see what is the impact of a light on the human being. And also, the architects like to design a building, to have the pairing of lights indoor with the outdoor lights. Yes, indeed. Uh, they are more extreme situation, like in the far north of Canada. You may have days that last 20 hours and more. In winter, it's all of the opposite. So this affects the circadian cycle of its inhabitants. So we see how our lights can help and help us to adapt to the light conditions. When there's light outside, we're going to let light come in as much as possible. And in summer, we don't want to, because sun lasts for many, many hours. We're still awake and so on and so forth. So this is on what we're concentrating. What are the architectural elements that could be designed in order to manage this? Super. Thank you. I can see that there are other questions, but unfortunately, time is flying. Oh well, I will give you my email. Please share it. So it'll be a pleasure for me to answer your question. And you can contact me on the different platforms. Thanks, Francois, once again for your great presentation, all of the elements, and thanks to the audience for their questions and for all of the attendants. You will get the survey by email, and do not hesitate to give your information. Thank you. Truly appreciate it.